Avon Barksdale and Marlo Stanfield, to the disapproval of many, are two characters who are far more alike than a lot of Wire fans would care to admit. And I don't say that just because they were both the two kingpins who had a shot at ruling over the West Side during the course of the show, but rather I say that because during their respective reigns, they both found themselves fighting very similar battles, both with each other, the police, and other gangsters.
What people gonna say when they see this cocksucking faggot out in the sunshine?
Alright, bring it in.
Like it ain't no thing to take my shit.
You know, the crown ain't worth much if the nigga wearing it always getting his shit took.
Now in this video I'm going to be attempting to answer the question of, who was the better leader, Avon Barksdale or Marlo Stanfield? And to answer this question I've sort of split it up into 5 different categories. 1, we're going to find out who of these two was a smarter decision maker based on longevity, i.e. who was thinking about the future and who was only capable of solving an immediate issue. 2 is reputation. Who did the streets fear and or respect more? And did any of that play a factor when it came to having a smoother and ultimately longer rule? 3 is conflict resolution. Who was better at dealing with, say, war, dysentery in the ranks, or even just Omar Little? 4 is self-awareness. Who knew when they were a little out of their depth, and was smart enough to trust another when it came to dealing with a situation they themselves might not have been suited to deal with?
A wise king knows what he knows and what he doesn't.
And finally, police intervention. Who was better when it came to staying out of jail and a step ahead of Lester Freeman's major crimes unit? Now I want to clarify something before I attempt to answer this question. As of writing this video, I do not have a predetermined answer to this question. I am not biased to either character, and I'm going to be looking at this as objectively as possible based on the criteria. Essentially, I, like you, am going to be uncovering the answer to this question as the video goes on. Now first is longevity. Who was thinking 3 steps ahead and who was only capable about thinking of the right now? And to answer this question I want to take a look at how both Avon and Marlo deal with the topic of murder. As D'Angelo states in season 1, it's the bodies the police are after, and so the more you drop, the easier you're going to make it for the likes of the major crimes unit.
You think 5-0 would care about niggas getting high in the projects? Man, 5-0 be down here about the bodies, yo.
Now to answer this we can actually take a look at the introductions of both these characters. As in these introductions, both Avon and Marlo make their opinion on murder quite clear.
What's up? Look what they did to my ride! I'll do it or don't, but I got some place to be.
You can't play him out of that lobby. You can't take a beating neither. So the first thing you do, you get all emotional. You pull your gun out. You do some dumb shit. Then now we got a workaround.
Now Avon makes murder out to be a sort of last resort, as he reprimands D'Angelo for not doing everything in his power to dodge killing a man, even if it means taking a beating in front of an entire lobby of people. And in all fairness to Avon, he does back this up later on in the season.
Fucking cop, man, a cop? How stupid is this motherfucker? If you see a bitch in the car, change it up.
Marlo Stanfield, on the other hand, treats murder as basically a whatever, as he says to one of his soldiers threatening Bubbles, either do it or don't. Marlo couldn't give 2 fudges. And Marlo does back this no fudges about murder mentality up multiple times throughout his reign. And when all is said and done, Marlo's body count was somewhere in the 30s. Not a very wise move if you're looking to remain on top for a long period of time. Which in all fairness to Marlo, he wasn't trying to do. And so it would be stupid of me to not give this point to Avon, who was not only king for a longer duration than Marlo, but one could argue that upon Avon's release from prison, with Slim in charge he could find himself sitting back on the throne, whereas Marlo Stanfield was completely wiped out after being king for only 4 years. Now secondly we have reputation, which I actually believe goes somewhat hand in hand with longevity, as if people don't fear and or respect you, then in the world of The Wire you just aren't going to last very long. D'Angelo is a perfect example of this, as despite his crew only being small, they were basically just doing whatever they pleased half the time, because none of them really respected or were afraid of D'Angelo.
Hey, yo, Poop.
Yeah, come here, man. What's happening? What the fuck is that? What the fuck is that? You know the fucking rules?
Now to answer the question of would a leader rather be feared or respected, in the case of The Wire I'm actually leaning more towards being respected. And I only say this because a lot of these characters actually seemed either too stupid to ever realise the danger they were in, or they all just had balls of steel. Let me explain. How many characters on The Wire thought to snitch on their boss, and not one showed any signs of being afraid? Wallace didn't even think twice about coming back to the pit after agreeing to snitch, because for whatever reason he just didn't believe he was in any danger. Bodie couldn't have cared less about snitching on Marlo, as his hatred toward Marlo far outweighed his fear toward him. He even continued to work Marlo's corner after partnering up with McNulty. And D'Angelo threatened to snitch practically every time he went into the box because he knew Avon would never do anything to hurt him. D'Angelo actually severs ties with Avon after learning of his involvement with the Hotshots because he lost all respect for Avon as a person. Marlo Stanfield even understood the importance of respect and love, as on some level he attempts to buy such early on in season 4.
Damn, 200? Yo, thanks, man.
Oh, you need to thank my man Marlo. He ain't want to see you little motherfuckers going raggy on the first day.
Now that isn't to say that to be feared is completely null and void, as there are a multitude of examples on the show where fear proves itself more than valuable. I mean, Marlo literally took control of the co-op without any resistance because they were all too afraid to move against him. However, to remain a king to be feared, both Avon and Marlo needed to commit a vast number of murders, which in the long run wound up working against them. Take for example Avon's murder of Gant, which was committed in an attempt to spread fear throughout the pit, ultimately leading to the imprisonment of a top soldier in Bird. Or the murder of Bodie, which drove McNulty to want to go after Marlo, who only had to kill Bodie because Bodie was so sick and tired of Marlo constantly killing people in his effort to spread fear. This point is honestly very close, however I'm gonna have to give it to Avon, as Avon's reputation ultimately did more for his reign than Marlo's did for his. When Marlo won the Connect through fear, Avon had an open line to the likes of New York, all because he was respected. Marlo also had geniuses like Slim refuse to work alongside him partially because he wasn't respected, whereas Avon had access to the wisdom people like Slim could offer, because Avon was respected, and because of such Slim wanted to work alongside him.
Slim, I want you to take over Hungry Man's slice of the cake.
Meaning no disrespect, but I ain't cut out to be no CEO.
Now thirdly is conflict resolution. Who was better when it came to fighting a war, dealing with dysentery in the ranks or even just Omar Little? And luckily for us, both Avon and Marlo actually find themselves fighting the same battles more often than not. Now first of all, let's take a look at the war both Avon and Marlo waged with one another in season 3. And I want to start out by giving Marlo massive credit here, as the entire pace of this war was essentially dictated by him, who was, let's face it, a step ahead of Avon the entire time. He absolutely demolished Avon's people when they attempted to make a move on one of Marlo's corners. This scene also showed us that Marlo's soldiers were far better disciplined than Avon's.
You didn't get near your shot off. Speak to the quality of Barksdale people.
Marlo was smart enough to recognise that Devon was a trap, and actually used this information to his advantage to get the drop on Avon. And when Chris Partlow points out that the Barksdales are going to think they're weak by not coming out to claim their corners, Marlo again uses this knowledge to his advantage to get the drop on Avon's people once more.
Well, Barksdale gonna think we weak, not coming out to claim what's ours. Police leave them corners, he's gonna be back out there.
I know he will.
Marlo also utilises his soldiers in a far smarter fashion than Avon utilises his, as during the war Avon spreads his people extremely thin, by sending them after both Marlo and Omar at the same time. Whereas Marlo's focus never breaks, he uses every man he has for the task at hand. Even when dealing with Omar Little, Marlo was able to do what Avon could never, that being to get the better of Omar not once but twice. First, Marlo sets Omar up for the robbery of Oldface Andre's store, and secondly he uses Monk as bait to get the drop on Omar at Monk's apartment. Something Avon was only ever able to do via sheer luck, when Weebay arrived just in time to save Avon after Omar had just gotten the drop on him. Now when it comes to dysentery in the ranks, Marlo honestly didn't have half the issues Avon did, as he actually treated the majority of his men with a lot of respect. I mean, look at how he handled the situation with Fruit in season 3. When Fruit's numbers are down, rather than Marlo berating Fruit in front of the other soldiers, something Stringer, Avon's second in command, would have done, Marlo gives Fruit what he needs, which is the go-ahead to move on Bodhi's squad. And such is why Marlo's soldiers are so loyal to him, as he actually to some extent respects those beneath him, and doesn't humiliate them every chance he can. And because he respects them, they respect him.
Oh, hold on. We're from Marlo. So, what you want us to do?
Get back to work.
Avon, however, aside from D'Angelo, doesn't really pay that much attention to what the majority of his soldiers are doing. He just allows Stringer to run around and lose all their money despite, quote,
I seen it coming.
He also has Stringer pretty much do everything even when he's released from prison. Like, why would you send Stringer Bell to go try mediate with Marlo? Surely you yourself would want to go talk to the guy you're on the brink of going to war with. He also hires gangsters like Gerard and Sapper, and unlike Marlo, makes little effort to have his better soldiers like Cutty and Slim take the time to train them. Honestly, I think Marlo blows this point out of the water, and it's a shame he wasn't able to garner the respect of outsiders, like he was the soldiers in his organisation.
No one fucks with me now.
Well, that don't mean there couldn't be some unforeseen
No one fucks with me now.
Now next up is that of self-awareness. Which of these two were capable of understanding that not always were they the best strategist in the room, and were actually smart enough to take on board the advice given to them by somebody wiser? Now first we ought to take a look at how both Avon and Marlo responded to the advice given to them by their right-hand men at the time on how to deal with Omar Little. After the death of Stinkham, Avon is advised by Stringer Bell to try and reach out to Omar Little, call a truce.
Let the faggot get comfortable, and when he do, gonna pop up his head, boom.
Avon, however, makes the argument that his reputation could be at risk if people see Omar walking around in broad daylight. And so in an effort to protect his rep, he tells Stringer no. And later on in that very same episode, Omar actually gets a drop on Avon and nearly kills him. And it's only after Avon nearly dies does he finally take on board Stringer's advice. By then, however, too much time has gone down, and Omar sees right through Avon's false white flag and flees to New York. Avon has done nothing to avenge the death of one of his top soldiers, and nearly died all because he chose not to listen to his partner's advice.
What people gonna say when they see this cocksucking faggot out in the sunshine?
All right, bring it in.
Like it ain't no thing to take my shit.
Later on in Season 3, during Avon's war with Marlo, Slim Charles offers Avon some similar advice when Avon suggests warring with both Marlo and Omar at the same time. Slim tells Avon that such might not be the smartest decision, and having clearly learnt nothing from his first outing with Omar, Avon rejects Slim's advice. And same as it did in Season 1, Avon's decision winds up backfiring on he and the organisation.
You sure you want us on Marlo and Omar both? I mean, Omar ain't come back on us since we got his bitch. So maybe...
Look, I'm home, Charles. I'm home.
Marlo Stanfield, however, when offered advice from Chris Partlow on how they should go at Omar after the robbery of the card game, unlike Avon, actually takes the advice on board and manages to get the better of Omar Little. Marlo also acknowledges and reacts accordingly whenever given advice from his advisor Vincent. Take for example the time Vincent warned Marlo just how dangerous it could be if he chooses to go to war with Avon. Marlo takes this advice on board, and unlike Avon, never underestimates the ability of his enemy, which one could argue is part of the reason why Marlo won the war. Now outside of taking advice from others, both Avon and Marlo were also very aware of people trying to run a game on them. Take for example the time Avon was able to sense when Andy Krawcheck was trying to run a game on he and Stringer. Andy was using fancy terminology to try and manipulate the two into giving them more money, which Avon, unlike Stringer, was able to spot from a mile away. And Marlo was self-aware enough to play along with Prop Joe's desires to act as a mentor. Marlo pretended as though he was learning from everything Prop Joe had to offer, when in actuality he was just trying to learn the ins and outs of money laundering, and get closer to the connection so he could finally can Proposition Joe.
But I treated you like a son.
I wasn't made to play the son.
It does actually shock me sometimes on rewatches that these two are nowhere near as ignorant as I originally believed them to be. However, I am going to have to give this point to Marlo, as frankly Marlo's self-awareness benefited Marlo more than Avon's self-awareness benefited Avon, if you get what I mean. Now finally we have police intervention, Who was better at staying off the Major Crimes Unit's radar? And who was better at dealing with the heat once the Major Crimes Unit were onto them? Now, Marlo Stanfield in the beginning of Season 4 is originally made out by Lester Freeman, to not even be in the same league as Avon Barksdale. However, we'll soon learn that Lester's assessment of Marlo isn't quite true, as for an entire season the Major Crimes Unit aren't able to get squat on Marlo simply because he isn't dropping any bodies. And as we know, such is due to Marlo's sort of genius move to hide the people he kills in vacant houses, which unlike Avon was partly the reason why Marlo was able to evade the police for an entire season. The other part is due to the Stanfield case for the majority of Season 4 being run by no other than brain-dead Herc.
Just shut up and play dumb. You can do that. No problem.
Now, Marlo makes an absolute fool out of Herc, as you would imagine. However, the moment Lester Freeman is put back on the case, Lester is able to find where Marlo hides all his bodies within a single episode. Now granted, he and McNulty aren't really able to work these bodies in the conventional manner, and such again is part of the reason why Marlo was able to last so long. However, the moment the two do set up their fake wire, Lester is able to crack Marlo's clock code in only 2 episodes. To compare, it took the entirety of the Major Crimes Unit 4 episodes to crack just a pager code used by the Barksdale crew. And even upon cracking this code, it still took the unit 8 more episodes to arrest Avon Barksdale. Whereas the morning Marlo's code was broken, his entire organisation was arrested that very same day. It's also important to note that Avon had to fend off against the entirety of the Major Crimes Unit when it was at its peak. McNulty, Lester, Prez, Daniels, Kima, and it still took them an entire season to put Avon away. And once Avon was released, they got extremely lucky with Stringer Bell snitching, as the information Stringer gave the MCU was all they had on Avon at the time. Marlo, however, was extremely lucky throughout the entirety of his reign. The MCU had gone to shit in Season 4, the political landscape made it so Marlo wasn't even under investigation in Season 5. Yet McNulty and Lester were still able to catch Marlo, all whilst having to con the entire city into believing there was a fake serial killer on the loose. Now don't get me wrong, Avon was also extremely lucky at times, from the MCU constantly being forced by higher-ups to act on shitty leads giving the Barksdales chance to adapt, or what about Sant'Angelo taking a piss on the rooftop when he could have been watching Avon pay off a bounty for a murder that had been committed the night before. There's no doubt Avon was lucky. However, to say that Marlo was better than Avon when it came to dealing with the police, no way. And thus Avon takes this point, and in my eyes is also the better leader of the two. Only just, however, Marlo most definitely had a tighter crew, especially in Season 3. But let me know your answer to this question down in the comments section. Was Avon the better leader, or was Marlo?